Hello and welcome to the Rebellious Times podcast. I'm Chris Januszewski. Today we'll be meeting with Ramsey Hadj, CEO of Storiad, who helps authors become great book marketers. Ramsey, how are you doing, sir?
I'm doing well, thank you. How are you?
I'm doing fine, thanks. Doing fine. We were just talking before about first day back at school and kind of getting the kids moving, and so
Yes.
I think it sounds like we've done a pretty good job, and we can kind of focus on the task ahead.
That's
So
right.
you're in a very unique business here. I've not had anybody on the show before that's kind of had a startup or attacked this market before. I have had founders on the show that have published books or intend on publishing books, so it's definitely something that will be interesting to a lot of founders as they become authorities in the space and want to kind of build their awareness. So maybe we could start with, your background, your journey through corporate America, and kind of how you arrived at building out Storiad and solving these challenges for book authors.
Sure thing, sure. My background prior to Storiad, I have degrees, undergraduate and graduate degrees from the University of Chicago, graduate degrees in economics. And so after I graduated from Chicago, I took various positions on the economics consulting side of the business with one of the big four auditing firms. And I was on the economic consulting side of the business. But at the same time, I'm a book fanatic, and I've been reading all my life. And a lot of my friends are authors, and I myself have notebooks upon notebooks upon notebooks filled with writing, scribblings, outlines, etc. At least used to. I've actually since published a book and completed several others. But one of the things that struck me from my friends who are authors is that, especially in one case, is that his name is Joe, and he worked for years to get his book complete, and then he spent even more years trying to get the book published, which he finally succeeded in getting published. So that was a really big thing. And the book came out, and he ended up selling several hundred copies at best. And being an economist, I sort of said, that's a really bizarre thing to have, because it was a really truly excellent book. I read it, I bought several copies, gave them as gifts, things along these lines. And I sort of started sniffing around the sort of book publishing universe and the book selling universe, and I found out that, and I mean, this is, for authors, this is not going to come as a shock at all, but I found out that it's a grossly inefficient market, in the sense that every year in the U.S. alone, let's say the U.S.-Canada market and the English-speaking book market, you're going to have 250,000, 300,000 new titles published every year. And in essence, each of those titles is a unique product. And so when your book comes out in 2025, not only are you, the author, competing against books that are coming out in 2025, but you're also competing books that came out in 2024 and books that came out in 1984 and 1904. I mean, people are still buying Hemingway, people are still buying Steinbeck, people are still buying Mark Twain. And if somebody has $10, they're trying to decide between your book and Edith Wharton book, for example. You got to compete against Edith, and she's been gone for a few decades. Anyway, so I realized that really it's all about, the more you study it, the more you realize it's really about getting the author, your name out there. Who you are as an author, why you write, what you've written, how you write, things along these lines. Now, clearly, if you have if you're extremely well-known, like a J.K. Rowling or a Stephen King, you're going to have your publisher do the vast majority of your marketing for you. You have your name recognition, but you also have a multi-million-dollar book promotion, book marketing, book publicity campaign behind you to get the word out there. Now, if you are an independent published author, for example, let's say you're going through a hybrid publisher, you're going through a Kindle Direct or something along these lines, you're going to come out with really nothing more than the email list that you have of your immediate network. And so the question, becomes, how do I expand my reach? You may have a social media presence. You may be on X or on Instagram or on Facebook, whatever the case may be. But still, that's a very small universe. So what I decided I really wanted to do is I wanted to try to replicate what established book companies do for their authors. What is it that they do for their authors? And how can I, using technology and now using AI, what can we as a company do to help authors design, build, and run very integrated, long-lasting, very affordable, and effective book promotion campaigns. And when we say book promotion, I mean promotion. We think of promotion as being having a subset of marketing, publicity, and networking. Because ultimately, when you're out there as an author, you're trying to make connections on the networking side. You're trying to market your book, trying to get people to engage in it, trying to buy it, read it, review it. And on publicity, you want people talking about it. So it's important for authors to differentiate those three elements of promotion: the marketing, the publicity, and the networking. And so what StoryAd has done is, we've gone out there and we've built all these really very easy to use, very intuitive, now AI supported software. And I say now because we just launched the AI side of it about 6 months ago. So now, when the author goes in, we're going to walk them, or the AI is going to walk them through step by step every step that you need to take as an author to design, build, and run an effective books promotion campaign. Because what we found is that, and maybe I'm jumping a little ahead here, Chris, I apologize, but what we found is a lot of times authors, because they're more on the creative side of the business than they are on the business side of the business, so to speak, is that they come into StoryAd and they run directly to the database. And that's not going to work. I mean, you have to come in, you have to build your campaign, and then you have to sort of understand what it is that you're trying to do. You have to set the goals, to figure out what you need to do to meet those goals, and then start pursuing those goals. But I think I jumped a little ahead there, Chris. Sorry, and I know you asked me a question about my background, but
That's all right. No, this is fine. This is the Rebellious Times podcast.
Yes, that's right.
Rebellion against our own plan.
Fight
That's
the system.
Totally
Yeah.
So when an author comes to you, kind of, when I think, so I know nothing about kind of publishing and marketing of books, and when I think of an author, okay, you might have like a Stephen King. When he publishes his book, he sits back and the dollars roll in and people buy his book and they review it, and he's got the brand, and I'm sure he generates a lot of money. If you're the CEO of a company in a specific vertical industry, you invest yourself emotionally and you invest your time into writing this book and putting yourself out there, putting your story and providing something that you believe is helpful to other people that might be similar to you. What state are they typically in when they come to you? Are they sitting there with boxes of books stacked up in the living room thinking, oh, I thought this would be easier? Or do they think ahead of time, okay, I'm thinking of publishing a book, maybe I better figure out how I'm going to market this? Like, where do you typically find them? Are they in a panic state? Are they organized?
I think, it's across the spectrum. We have a lot of authors come to us with a sort of a pre-plan in place, saying, my book is coming out in 6 months. This is what I plan to do prior to the release. This is what I plan to do in and around the release date. This is what I plan to do going forward. And those authors tend to do the best because they're already thinking in an organized, systematic, linear fashion, which I know for a creative, a lot of times it's an awful thing to say, but book promotion is a very linear process. It's not an event. It's a linear process. You start here, you move next one on and on and on. So those authors that come to us that way and are on StoryAd end up doing very, very well, and they stay with us for a long time, which is always, whenever you're paying for a service month over month, you know that you're doing a good job because they're getting their break even, so to speak. On the other side of the coin, other side of the spectrum, you have authors that show up who, exactly what you said, Chris, who have those those boxes in their room, in their garages, whatever the case may be, and they're saying, oh yeah, I thought this was going to be a lot easier. I thought if you build it, if you write it, they will come, but they don't. Once again, because you're not a Stephen King or you're not a well-known author, and so there's that sort of a now what, and there's a lot of the jumping on the internet, jumping on social media, sending out emails, but that kind of random ad hoc approach is not going to work. And then on other times we have people who come to us. So I'm trying to go through the entire spectrum. So that was sort of the middle of the spectrum, and on the other extreme of the spectrum is somebody will come to us say, I have 20 books. And I'm working on my 21st book. I just love to write. I love to write. I have a lot of series. Books that come in series, 5, 6, 7 books in a series. I sell, a few here and there, but it's more the joy of actually doing it. But now I've decided to try to get out there and monetize all the hard work I put into it. What should I do? right? That one is the most interesting because you have a lot of really you have a lot of stuff available, and you can you really, really, really need a plan at that point to sort of say, okay, you have to start from book one, and then walk people through the journey all the way through book 30, or whatever the case may be. So those are the three sort of general groupings we have. We have the people who are sort of thinking and pre, during, and post, and people who sort of it's happened and oops, now what, and they're running to catch up, and people who are thinking it's an afterthought. But it all comes down to the same thing. It really comes down to you need a plan. And absent a plan, and absent a solid book promotion plan that addresses the marketing, the publicity, and the networking, and all the subsets of the the research and the messaging and the asset marketing, asset building, all these things, it's not going to work. It's just simply not going to work for them. And so what we try to do as Storia is we try to provide as much of the sort of guidance as possible. And we call ourselves, as Storia, we call ourselves a DIY plus model, a do-it-yourself plus, with the plus side being we do a lot of one-on-one Zoom calls with authors. And we'll get on, we cannot do the work for them. We're not a consulting firm. we cannot sort of take it on and sort of build the platform for them, but we can talk about their strategy. How are they using the StoryEd tools? How are they using AI? What sort of, how are you collaborating with AI? And then in turn, AI is giving you some guidance. What are you doing with that guidance? The most important thing is, are you managing your time properly? And because ultimately that's what it comes down to. Because a lot of authors are writers, they're writing as a sort of a secondary, that's almost like a hobby. It's not their primary job. They have jobs, they have families, etc. So their time is very limited. So managing your time is just as important as managing your book promotion budget. And so the DIY Plus model that StoryEd has built is really focused on providing the one-on-one support that authors sometimes want.
I see. So it's StoryEd more focused on publishing and marketing of a book as a distinct project, and the kind of the guidance and consulting for that, as opposed to actually executing. So writing the message and pushing it to different channels. Like, where's kind of the division there between the strategy and the execution?
Well, that depends, because I think once again, when you go into StoryEd, we have a trademark process called book promotion in motion. And it's for each book is going to each book that you have that you're looking to promote, and a lot of times authors come to us with multiple books and they're promoting multiple books simultaneously. So they're going to come into the book promotion in motion process, and it's going to walk them through. We want them to think, once again, I'm going to say systematically and linearly, and we want them to build the strategies. We want them to build a checklist, because checklists, we are big fans of checklists. The more checklists you have, the more organized you want to be. So your strategy is going to lead to your checklist. Your checklist, as you go through it, is the execution, right? So we've tried to make it as simple and as intuitive as possible, right? So you know what you need to do, you know how you need to do it, you know what you need to do, and now you do it. So that and that's what the checklist ultimately does. But you really do need, and this is when you're working with the StoryEd's AI author assistant AI bot. Its name is Storia, Storia, and Storia is very unique in the sense that it is focused 100% on who you are as an author and what your books are about. So if you ask Storia a question outside of book promotion, it won't answer you. It'll say that's beyond my pay grade, so to speak. And it learns about your market. It learns about your book. It learns about your book's market. It learns about you as an author and your style, your writing style, especially when you query it, all these things. AI is phenomenal. And so when you're working with AI and you're working to build these strategies, and you're working to build these checklists, and you're working with AI to do proper research on StoryEd databases, we have a massive media context database, and it's you just can't go in there and just pick them randomly. You have to sort of systematically choose and make lists and all that kind of really great stuff that once again StoryEd can help you with. And once you do that, the execution, it's all in the execution, how you go about executing and following that checklist and being as linear as possible with those checklists. and then constantly circling back. And I don't want to sound like a consultant talking about circling back, but that's really what you're doing. You're constantly going back to see what's working, what's not working. Working with Storia. Storia, this is what happened. This is what's happening in the market. What do you think, right? And just keeping Storia up to date on what you're finding when you're out there, when you're sending out emails, when you're doing your posts, when you're any sort of blogging that you're doing, interactions, any sort of podcast you're doing, interviews, whatever the case may be. You're treating Storia, your AI assistant, as a true assistant, right? As a thing, as a sentient thing that is learning. And the more it knows about what's happening outside the realm of the online, the smarter it's going to be in helping you execute your plan and execute your checklists.
Brilliant. Got it. Thank you. As I'm trying to imagine myself as being interested enough to have a book to publish and people want to hear about it, I imagine myself sitting in a bookstore, with your books on the side of the desk, waiting for people to come in as part of the launch. And I'm interested to know, from your perspective, how important is aligning everything around the launch, and what is the cycle time for marketing a book? For instance, if I launch the book in January and I'm not behaving with urgency and I'm kind of leaving tasks till September, October, it's probably going to have a very different impact than if I kind of condense everything into, 3 months, 6 months, whatever a typical cycle is. What would you say to somebody in terms of the level of urgency and the timeline to actually efficiently run a marketing program?
Yeah, that's a phenomenal question, and that's a great question because it goes to the very, very heart of the time management. And the way, when authors come to us, and they do come and get, seeking our advice on what's the best way to approach it, and I think the industry standard still holds true. 3 months prior, 3 to 4 months prior, 3 to 4 months during, and 3 to 4 months post. So you're looking at 9 to 12 months. So 3 to 4 months, so you get to 9 to 12 months. Now, remember that now in the age of print on demand, for example, and it's no longer, a book that came out, you can still market a book that came out multiple years ago, 4, 5, 6, 7 years ago, because the vast majority of people haven't heard of it, right? So it's brand new to them. So since you're no longer really dependent on bookshelf space at your local bookstore, it really doesn't make it that much of a difference anymore. Especially on print on demand. You're not holding inventory, so there's, and that sometimes causes a problem because you don't have that urgency. You're not sitting on all this capital that's been invested into print books. Although sometimes you are, so there is that urgency to get that inventory out the door and get that cash flow coming in. But on print on demand is very different, right? So it kind of creates that sort of, I'll just take it easy and it'll come in time. So. But for those authors who are more committed to having a systematic approach, 3 to 4 months before, 3 to 4 months during, or around the launch, 3 to 4 months after, and then especially if you're planning on having other books, perhaps in a series or other books unrelated, but you're looking to publish multiple books, it's really important to sort of stay out there. So you have your first book, you may be working on your second book, but once you get into these habits, create these habits where you spend X amount of hours a week doing something related to book promotion. And this is after the first year and a half of your first book being out, and you're sort of in the sort of habit of you're out there talking to people and just keeping your name, saying, hey, by the way, I have a new book coming out. I also have this older book, and just keeping people engaged. And it's kind of cliche about the community and all kind of stuff, but it's real. Readers a lot of time are really curious about who the author is, and are going to support some authors over other authors. They're going to support authors. I'll give you an example. There was one author we had on StoryAd who was always reaching out to book clubs and saying, hey, if you want, if you get my book, I will join you every week via Zoom at your book club, right? Awesome. And this was huge. She ended up selling thousands because she was doing this, and a lot of these book clubs. I heard that that this author is really involved, and she was giving insights. And this is the character. The characters were very interesting, and this is how the character evolved over time in my writing. And she would read from like first drafts, right? She would read about the character that had evolved from the first draft to the actual printed version. And it created a real sense of belonging and community with with that reading group and with the characters in that book. And then she's been with Storyhead for 3 years now, and she has 2 books, and she does the same thing with multiple reading groups. And I mean, and I'm hoping this kind of thing catches on, because there's nothing cooler than having the author, just sort of telling you what's going on, right? Yeah. But a lot of some authors are very standoffish. Here's my book. That's the extent of my interaction with the public, and I get that. That's fine too. But some authors want to be more involved in the actual promotion of the book, and the actual keeping it as a almost like a living testament of who they are as an author. Yeah. I mean, but the bottom line is, it's all about creativity. Get out there, do what comes naturally to you, but just do it. I'll do a lot of that thing.
Yeah, I love the whole reaching out to book clubs, almost like guerrilla book marketing, right?
Oh yeah, it works. I did it. I have a bunch of University of Chicago friends. We talked about doing that very thing, and we'll probably do it. And I mean, it would be really great to get a historian or something. We've never actually. I haven't heard of somebody doing it outside of the fiction realm. I'd actually love to do it with somebody who's, like either like a professor who's a historian, or just one of these sort of armchair historians who put out these really great books, like a Stephen Ambrose or something. Anyway, that'd be kind of cool.
Yeah, maybe there's a thought for a podcast series, right?
Yeah, there you go.
So, are there any themes of, obviously, if somebody wants to author a book, they'll author on what their expertise is and what they're passionate about, right? They're not going to switch it up just because it's popular. But I'm interested to know, are you seeing any themes of like book subjects that are particularly popular, or particularly competitive, or particularly current?
I think YA, young adult, is always super hot, right? And I know, I live with a young adult, and she is buying books in this house, there's no budget on books. You can go nuts. You want to spend $1,000 on books, you got it, not a problem. And so a lot of these books, it's these YA books, YA paranormal, YA vampire, YA outer, all this kind of science fiction YA stuff is really big.
Okay.
And I find that to be memoirs. People are coming out with, there's a lot of memoirs. We've seen a lot of memoirs coming out. We've seen a lot of spiritual, religious works coming out. I've seen a lot of crime fiction, noir, neo-noir, neo-western noir, which happens to be my favorite. I put out a book on short pulp fiction-y stories. But I think the accessible, it's all about, we're finding accessible fiction to be the most sort of the hottest thing that we're seeing.
It's interesting to hear the whole young adults theme, because we're in a world now, especially I've got young kids and you've got a child, where screen time is a thing for parents to try and battle the kids. My son, he loves to read, he absolutely loves it, but he absolutely loves screens as well. And I think I'm doing a pretty good job of keeping him away from the screens. But it's reassuring to hear that kids aren't just on video games, and that you're seeing a lot of demand for young adults still reading physical books. So yeah, that's great to hear.
Oh, I think, all her friends, and my son, who's 10, he and his friends are reading the Who Was, What Was series, and I Survived. There's a series called Who Was. They have all these sort of great personages throughout history, and I Survived. I survived this cataclysmic this and a whatever. All these sort of boys kind of stuff, right? Oh my God, there was a tornado. And the boys will have these books and trade them around and have their own little personal book clubs. And even the girls, I see them more with books than I do with their handhelds. So maybe I'm hoping that it's a trend. Like anything else, I think you need the balance.
Yeah, absolutely.
There's a lot of great stuff you can get from your devices, but there's even greater stuff to get from your. Personally, I read physical. I love physical books, so I still get the paper and the ink and the delicious paper smell.
Yeah.
But that's just me.
I think it's here to stay. We've got Kindles and other ways to access, but I think actually a physical book, like you say, to be able to turn the pages, and there's a bit more of an attachment and engagement with it.
It really is. It brings back memory. It's memories. But
So
sorry, go ahead.
no, that's all right. No, this is great. Let's flip back over to the business side.
Yes.
So I'd love to hear about your kind of how you structured the business and your approach to growth. Obviously, a lot of the founders I have on here on the show, they go down the VC route. And that's a very normal route, and that's one if you get it right, you can create rapid growth and have a ton of success. But not everybody wants to do that. I released an episode this week that looks at a bootstrap founder. Interested to hear how you approached your business in that respect.
Yeah, the story ad is bootstrapped 100%. I call it the Bank of Ramsey, and the Bank of Ramsey funds it. And we, first and foremost, story ad is very niche. It's an extremely niche market. It's not like a scooter market where there are 10,000 different scooter startups and, a scooter in New York, a scooter company in San Francisco, Los Angeles, whatever. And they get $1 billion in funding and they end up, go IPOing through a SPAC or something. We didn't take that route at all. I didn't approach the VC. I didn't take the VC approach because I wanted two things. One, I wanted to eat the risk because I didn't want to pay. Have somebody else assume the risk and give 40% of the company for pittance. I wasn't going to do that. Two, I wanted to maintain control of the company and the direction and where it was going, what it looked like, the look and feel, and third and most important, I have two children, and I know that when you're working, when somebody else has money in your company, they expect you to work 23 and a half hours a day. I work very, very hard for StoryAd, but my children are, and the family, very, very important. There's no way on earth I was going to miss them growing up, and so when you fund it yourself, you set the time. You structure it the way you want to structure it, and I've been very lucky in the sense of having a really wonderful team. We're all sort of in the same boatish kind of thing, same-ish boat, with kids at different things. So everybody sort of picks up the slack where need be, and we get things done. Could things have been done faster? Without a shadow of a doubt, yes. Does it help to have a lot of copious amount of venture capital money to go out there and do the marketing better and the software development better? Yes. But I mean, like everything in life, it's a series of trade-offs. So we've traded that. We traded sort of money for a longer time horizon. So now, the kids are older. There's more time is being put into, the outreach. And, we have StoryAd now at a version 2.0 with the AI, and we're learning so much from the market and making our changes. And you're asking about growth. So now we're focusing on the getting out there and truthfully, getting people to respond to my emails. I mean, that's the big thing, right? That's getting people to respond to my phone calls, getting people to stop by the booth for a demo, things along these lines. Yeah. And when you're smallish, you know how that is. It's just a lot harder to get somebody's full attention. But I think once they see what we do and how we do it, and the beauty, the true beauty behind the software and how it's put together, I think people sort of sit up and say, okay, tell me more, and then that opens up a conversation. And really, that's all we're looking for, to open up a conversation and see how we can work to help authors sell more books. And for the author, it's great, and for the publisher, obviously, they want their authors to sell more books. So it's a win-win-win for everybody involved.
Brilliant. Well, I love it. I love what you're doing. I love your mission, helping authors get their message out and find readers, and get these beautiful books in people's hands so they can enjoy them and learn from them. So, thank you so much for coming on Rebellious Times podcast today. I've really enjoyed talking to you, Ramsey. All the best with your business, and I hope to see more and more users on the platform and getting those books out there.
Thank you, Chris. I greatly appreciate it. Truly. Thank you.
Cheers.